Okay, pre-algebra, section 9.2, simplifying square roots. Now, folks, yesterday we talked about square roots and what that meant, and today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to simplify square roots. We kind of simplify square roots like we need to simplify a fraction that's not reduced. If we have 10 over 6, we have to simplify that to 5 over 3, and if we have square root 75, we need to change that. There's a way that we can simplify it, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to simplify square roots. Okay, so I'm going to sort of read through this first part, and it says, the key rule to grasp from this section is that two square roots can be multiplied. Okay, now I want us to look at this first one. Whoa. Okay, it says that this part right here, the square root of 4, that's 2. And the square root of 16 is 4. And it wants to multiply those two things, and we're going to get 8. And that's what it shows right here, right? The square root of 4 times the square root of 16 is the same thing as the square root of 2 times the square root of 4. I'm sorry, not the square root, but it's the same thing as 2 times 4, which is 8. Okay? Now, we can see how that simplifies. But if we also look at this part, watch what happens here. The square root of 4 times the square root of 16 is equal to the square root of 64. I just multiplied the 4 and the 16 to get 64, and I kept it under the square root. We can actually multiply radicals by each other, but they have to both be radicals. And some of you may say, hey, Mr. C, what are you talking about, a radical? This is a radical. That's a radical sign, which means the square root of. Okay? So when I say radical, I mean numbers inside of the square root sign. So I'm multiplying this radical, square root 4, times this radical, square root 16, and I get this radical, square root 64. And the square root of 64, we know, is 8. I get the same thing. You're drawing a lot of arrows, Mr. C. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Okay. Now, I can multiply square roots. If I can multiply square roots, I can also factor them. Okay? If I can put them together with multiplication, I can break them apart. So, for example, the square root of 75 is equal to the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. Now that's interesting because I picked the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. I didn't pick the square root of 15 times the square root of 5. That gives me 75 also. But I picked the square root of 25 because I know what this equals. That's a perfect square. The square root of 25 is 5. So I can write my answer as 5 times the square root of 3. Now, if you take your calculator and you punch in the square root of 75, let me get my old trusty calculator out here. Trusty calculator is going to say that the square root of 75 is equal to, and you guys are probably already ahead of me, 8.660254038. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the square root of 3. Okay, second square root 3, and that's going to be 1.732050808, and then I'm going to multiply that by 5, because remember I've got 5 square root 3 here, so times 5, and guess what I'm going to get? If I multiply that by 5, I'm going to get 8.660254038. The same exact thing. Those two things are equal. They're just different ways of writing it. And we want to simplify it. We want to pull out any perfect squares inside of a number that we can and simplify it to its whole number answer, okay, instead of a square root. So let's see how that works in some of these problems. All right? Good job.